Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm excited to share a wonderful story with you today.
The Cipher of the Natchez Trace, 1821. The year is 1821. The United States is stretching its limbs west, the Mississippi River, a shimmering, dangerous artery of commerce, and Washington, D.C., a nest of ambitious, fearful men. Eli Vance was a writer for the newly vitalized U.S. Postal Service, a ghost who lived in the saddle between the rough-and-tumble frontier town of Nashville, Tennessee, and the capital. He carried more than letters. He carried the lifeblood of the young nation, political secrets, financial reports, and the fragile promises of governance. One humid August evening, while sorting a fresh lockbox of diplomatic correspondence meant for Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, Eli found something strange tucked beneath a Treasury ledger. It was a single sheet of heavy parchment sealed with dark wax, not the official eagle, but a crudely stamped hydra. When he broke the seal, he didn't find words. He found an array of meticulously drawn geometric symbols and numerical shifts. The decryption. Eli was no statesman, but he was a keen observer of the postmaster's art. Every cipher the government used, from the Caesar shift to the simple Vigenère table, was built on predictable, logical progressions. This was different. It used both rotational symmetry and a complex numerical key based on the recently established population count of the Louisiana Territory. The informative core. This cipher was a revolutionary form of polyalphabetic substitution, an early nod to the cryptographic science that would define future wars. The use of a public statistic, the census, as a hidden changing key was a stroke of genius, pointing to an extremely educated non-governmental actor. Driven by curiosity and a deep loyalty to the Republic, Eli spent 3 sleepless nights in a remote cabin near the Natchez Trace, a dangerous, notorious postal road, working by the light of a sputtering oil lamp. He finally broke it. The deciphered message was not a foreign plot, but a domestic one, titled The Western Compact. It detailed a massive, coordinated effort by influential, wealthy planters in the South and West, men who hated the federal government's growing authority, to undermine the national currency and force the secession of the newly acquired territories. The plan involved counterfeiting treasury notes and engineering a run on the second bank of the United States. The final line was chilling. The separation begins with the autumn harvest. All debts dissolved. The deadly ride. Eli knew he couldn't mail this. He couldn't trust any stagecoach or official rider. The Hydra was too powerful. He had to ride the 500 miles himself through the hostile wilderness and the shadow of the conspirators to deliver the evidence directly to the president. He swapped his postal mount for a faster, tougher horse and began the desperate journey east. Layer 1. The Trace. The Natchez Trace was famed for its banditry and treacherous river crossings. Eli navigated swampy, mosquito-ridden paths, avoiding known standoffs where robbers preyed on wealthy travelers. He had to rely on the hospitality of isolated Native American settlements and frontier cabins where loyalty was often bought, not earned. Layer 2. The Pursuers. The conspirators quickly realized the document was missing. Their agent, a silent, ruthless man known only as the cartographer, due to his precision and use of maps, began trailing Eli. The cartographer used the very post roads Eli relied on, always 3 hours behind, leaving behind a trail of intimidated postmasters and dead ends. At a river ferry crossing in Virginia, Eli was cornered. The cartographer emerged from the mist, not with a gun, but with a ledger. You understand mathematics, Vance. You've seen the logic. The union is ill-conceived. It's unsustainable. Give me the compact. Eli didn't argue. He knew that the Constitution was built on a series of impossible compromises, but he believed in the promise of the document itself. Instead of handing over the parchment, Eli, an expert horseman, used the momentary distraction of a passing flatboat to plunge his horse into the muddy river. The parchment was wrapped in oilskin, but the effort nearly drowned him. The astonishing delivery. Exhausted, battered, and feverish, Eli arrived in Washington, D.C. He was barely coherent when he stumbled into the White House grounds, demanding to see President James Monroe. He was intercepted by a young, skeptical military aide. Eli, frantic, knew the only thing that would bypass bureaucracy was the cipher itself. He took the military aide's quill and, on a spare sheet of paper, quickly drew the Hydra symbol and the complex mathematical key derived from the Louisiana census data. The aide's eyes widened in recognition, or dread. The symbol, Eli learned later, was an ancient mark of the very secret society of elites who were financing the compact. The delivery was made. The compact was verified. The informative conclusion. President Monroe and his cabinet used the document not for a public trial, which would have torn the young country apart, but as leverage. They secretly and strategically intervened in the finances of the conspirators, subtly recalling bank loans and manipulating tariffs, effectively bankrupting the secessionists before they could act. Eli Vance was given a quiet promotion and a generous pension, sworn to secrecy. He returned to the West, the parchment burned, the cipher lost to time. Or so he thought. He knew the Hydra was defeated, but the fragility of the young American idea, dependent on a piece of paper, a quick horse, and one man's mathematical insight, remained a secret only he held. Epilogue: The Lost Key, 1831. 10 years melted into the rugged quiet of the Ohio Valley. Eli Vance had traded his saddle for a surveyor's compass, drawing the lines of the new state boundaries. He was now postmaster of a small, growing settlement in Indiana, a quiet man with a haunted intensity. He married a local school teacher, had 2 children, and lived under the shadow of James Monroe's handshake and the sealed secret. But the ghost of the Hydra still haunted the nation. In 1831, the nullification crisis, fueled by tariff disputes, tore South Carolina away from the Union's principles. The rhetoric felt familiar, the secessionist threats echoing the words of the burnt compact. One damp autumn morning, a dusty stagecoach delivered a small, peculiar package to his post office. It was a brass lockbox, old and intricately etched. Eli recognized the workmanship immediately. It was a specialized mail carriage used exclusively by the wealthiest planters, the very men who had financed the Hydra. Inside the box wasn't a letter, but a new cipher sheet. The geometric symbols were sharper, the numerical sequence longer. This time, the key wasn't the Louisiana census, but the annual cotton and tobacco output figures, a data set known only to a few powerful commodity brokers and the Department of Agriculture. Eli felt the cold recognition. The Hydra was not an organization, it was an ideology that simply adapted its key to the most valuable information of the moment. Before he could begin decoding, a figure stepped into his small wooden office, blocking the light. It was the cartographer. His face was older, scarred from their river encounter, but his eyes held the same precise, ruthless focus. "You should have let me drown you, Vance," the cartographer said softly, leaning against the counter. "You ruined the compact, but you only slowed the inevitable. The Union is weak, and its wealth is vulnerable. You took the document, but you never understood the source. The one who creates the key controls the future." The cartographer hadn't come for the new cipher sheet. He had come for Eli. He was the key maker, the master cryptographer who wove political secrets into public data. Eli Vance was the only man alive who could read his language. The long peace was over. Eli closed the lockbox, his hands gripping the brass. He was a surveyor and a postmaster, but beneath the quiet surface, the ghostwriter of the Natchez Trace was ready to ride again. The new battle for the soul of America would not be fought with armies, but with numbers. Chapter 3: The Almanac and the Grid. 1831. Eli locked the post office door, the brass lockbox clutched tight. The cartographer was gone as silently as he had arrived, leaving behind not a threat of violence, but a challenge of intellect. Eli knew the enemy's tactics. Use a complex polyalphabetic system, but anchor the key to a publicly accessible yet highly specialized numerical source. 10 years ago, it was the Louisiana Census. Now, it was the Great Southern Almanac, the meticulously tracked data of agricultural commodities that drove the nation's economy. The new key. Eli retrieved the latest issue of Niles Register and the annual trade summary. He wasn't looking for political news, he was looking for the raw digits. Bales of cotton shipped from Savannah, tons of tobacco moved through Richmond, and the fluctuation in the price per pound. These numbers, when aligned with the geometric symbols on the cipher sheet, would form the new rotational grid. He worked in the attic above his quiet home, the rhythmic sound of his wife teaching arithmetic downstairs, providing a strange counterpoint to his feverish mental calculations. The cipher's cruelty. The cartographer had learned from their first encounter. The new cipher wasn't about secession rhetoric. It was a set of financial instructions designed to cause immediate, surgical collapse. Eli deciphered a block of text that sent a chill down his spine. On the 18th day, the eastern banks shall receive the false ledger. The price of Virginia leaf will drop 5 cents per pound within a single hour. The panic will follow the telegram lines, and the North will choke on Southern debt. The wealth of the Atlantic seaboard will transfer to the interior by sunup. This was far more dangerous than the Western Compact. That plan was slow, political, and required popular consent. This was fast, economic, and relied on speed of information. The informative layer. In 1831, the magnetic telegraph was still a dream, but information was transmitted rapidly over fixed routes via semaphore stations and synchronized stage schedules. The cartographer planned to use the postal grid itself, the very system Eli served, to execute the financial maneuver. The false ledger would be rushed to New York, triggering the panic, while the key conspirators, based in Charleston, would profit from the manufactured collapse before the news could travel back south. Eli realized his role had changed. He wasn't just a messenger anymore. He was the guardian of the grid. He couldn't stop the ledger, which was already in transit. He had to disrupt the information flow, slow down the critical news until Washington could react. He knew exactly where the weak point was, a small, critical staging post in rural Pennsylvania where the Boston-New York mail converged with the route to Philadelphia. If he could get there before the false ledger's effects were fully disseminated, he could buy the Union a crucial 24 hours. His quiet life was over. He kissed his wife goodbye, told her he had a surveying emergency, and rode out before dawn, the brass lockbox secured, the ghost rider of the Natchez Trace reawakened in the cold air of Indiana. He was heading east once more, chasing a phantom ledger across a continent that was now connected by fragile threads of scheduled communication. Chapter 4. The Juncture in Pennsylvania, 1831. The ride from Indiana was a blur of mud, hardtack, and sheer willpower. Eli pushed his mount relentlessly, changing horses at every major relay station, flashing his decade-old but still valid U.S. Postal Service identification. His official status granted him access to the priority routes, but it also made him conspicuous. He reached the Pennsylvania hills just as the deadline approached, the morning of the 18th. The staging post was called the Juncture, a sprawling wooden complex that housed a blacksmith, a tavern, and the regional postmaster's office, a vital node where the northern and southern mail lines crossed. Eli dismounted, his legs shaky. He scanned the scene. No sign of the cartographer, but Eli knew his enemy never dealt in brute force. He operated through corruption and precision. The target, the stagecoach carrying the New York special mail pouch and likely the false ledger, had just arrived. The local postmaster, a stout man named Mr. Finch, was already overseeing the transfer. Eli intercepted Finch near the sorting room. I am Eli Vance, assigned by the Postmaster General. We have intelligence of a contagious illness affecting the mail from Charleston. I need to quarantine the inbound Southern bags immediately." Finch blinked. "Illness? Sir, this is the New York mail. It's going to Wall Street." "If even one clerk handles a contaminated letter, the disruption will be catastrophic," Eli insisted, his eyes hard. He brandished his brass lockbox, giving it the gravity of a federal decree. 2 hours of isolation and cleaning, no exceptions, Washington's orders. The threat of plague, a very real fear in 1831, was enough. Finch, terrified of a public health scare, grudgingly agreed. Eli secured the bags in the postmaster's private smokehouse, claiming the high heat would sterilize them. He had bought precious time, but he hadn't yet identified the ledger. As he began carefully inspecting the contents of the sealed mail, looking for envelopes bearing the telltale scent of expensive paper and the hydrowax, a distraction arrived. A young, nervous clerk rushed in. "Mr. Finch, there's a gentleman, a surveyor, at the stable. He insists his horse was stolen by a mail agent yesterday somewhere west of Harrisburg. He's demanding the fastest mount you have." Eli froze. A surveyor. The cartographer had chosen his disguise well, a field Eli himself now occupied. The stolen horse claim was a simple, calculated way to requisition the next outgoing express rider's mount, allowing the cartographer to overtake Eli's slower pace and ensure the false ledger's transmission went uninterrupted. Eli knew the cartographer would confront him here, in the nerve center of the information grid, not on the road.
Chapter 5. The Equation of Delay, 1831. Eli quickly identified a thick sealed envelope marked simply J.P. Morgan & Co., N.Y. It was too large to be a standard letter. It felt like a bound ledger. He secreted the envelope inside the brass lockbox just as Finch reappeared, ushering in the supposed surveyor. The cartographer wore a dark, clean wool coat, his hair neatly tied back, a stark contrast to Eli's sweat-stained shirt. He carried no weapons, only a rolled map case. He looked every bit the educated, respected professional. "Mr. Vance, I believe," the cartographer said, his voice smooth, devoid of the earlier menace. "A word of advice. Playing the contagion card is crude. The mail delays alone will cost the government 3 times the Virginia tobacco profits they are trying to save. The Union can recover from a delay, not a collapse," Eli countered, leaning against the sturdy oak sorting table, concealing the lockbox behind him. "Ah, but there is no delay, Mr. Vance. You stopped the northbound delivery, but the true trigger is in the southbound line." The cartographer pointed to the freshly loaded coach heading toward Baltimore, which would connect to the Charleston line. The false ledger, as you deciphered, goes north to crash the market. But the confirmation of the crash, the trigger for the short sellers in Charleston to cash in, must travel south, rapidly. You slowed the ledger, but you didn't slow the profit signal. The layered trap. Eli realized the depth of the scheme. The cartographer hadn't used the ledger to transmit the critical data. He had used the market panic itself as the trigger. The moment northern banks started refusing the false notes, that news, carried by the next outbound southern coach, became the all-clear signal for the Hydra to strike. Eli's disruption of the northbound mail had been a magnificent failure. He had only delayed the victim's reaction, while the attacker's signal was now speeding south. "The profit window closes in less than 12 hours, the cartographer murmured, stepping closer. "Give me the cipher. You can't stop the speed of greed, Vance. It moves faster than your fastest horse." Eli's eyes darted to the clock. He couldn't ride faster than the stagecoach. He couldn't outfight the cartographer in the middle of a busy station. He needed a different kind of disruption, a mathematical one. He needed to introduce random noise into the system. Suddenly, Eli grabbed the nearest box of dry gunpowder used for the tavern's hunting supplies. He didn't light it. He used the powder's dark, fine dust to obscure the entire glass face of the massive central postal clock on the wall, the official chronometer that governed the entire region's stagecoach schedule. The postal grid runs on synchronized time, Eli explained, backing away slowly. If the master clock is unreadable, every stagecoach driver, every postmaster, and every relay station operating out of this juncture will be running on independent, staggered time. The schedule dissolves into chaos. The prophet signal loses its precision. The cartographer's smooth composure finally cracked, a flash of pure intellectual fury crossing his face. Eli hadn't stopped the mail. He had destroyed the schedule, the invisible backbone of the 19th century communication network, making the prophet signal untrustworthy and unreadable. The escape clause. The cartographer lunged for the lockbox. Eli, however, was still the faster horseman. He used the moment of the cartographer's rage to kick over the heavy sorting table, sending piles of letters and packages scattering into the gunpowder-blackened air. While Finch screamed for help, Eli vaulted over the debris, grabbing a fresh horse from the stable, the very one the cartographer had tried to requisition. "You win the equation, Vance," the cartographer roared, wiping dust from his eyes. "But the answer still arrives in Charleston." "Not if the government knows the question first," Eli shouted back, already galloping east, clutching the lockbox containing the counterfeit ledger and the new unsolved cipher. His destination was now Philadelphia, where he could dispatch a certified express rider, unaffected by the juncture's chaos, directly to President Andrew Jackson's Treasury Department. He had bought the Union roughly 36 hours of mathematical chaos, just enough time for the real government to react.
Chapter 6. The Unraveling Schedule, 1831. Eli reached Philadelphia 2 days later, a ragged blur of determination. He secured the fake ledger with a trusted Treasury agent, ensuring the New York banks were alerted to the counterfeit scheme, effectively dissolving the northbound attack. The southbound failure. The cartographer's true genius, the reliance on the speed of the panic itself, was fatally wounded by the corrupted clock at the juncture. The news of the sudden market volatility, carried on the southbound mail, arrived in Charleston staggered and inconsistent. Some telegram stations reported delays of 4 hours, others 6. The conspirators, needing split-second timing to maximize their short-selling profits, received conflicting reports about whether the price drop had actually occurred or was merely postal rumor. Afraid to commit their vast reserves based on unreliable intelligence, they hesitated. The market panic they had engineered in the North began to self-correct as the Treasury, alerted by Eli's evidence, stepped in to honor the notes, stabilizing the currency. The profit window snapped shut. Instead of a windfall, the Hydra conspirators had only managed to create minor market turbulence and attract unwanted federal attention. The cartographer himself was not apprehended, but his scheme was ruined. His reputation as a master strategist was damaged, and the wealthiest planters, once again financially crippled by the federal response, were forced to dissolve their latest iteration of the secessionist Hydra. Eli Vance had saved the Union not with a gun, but by understanding that in the modern world, information latency was the ultimate weapon. Final epilogue: The Perpetual Guardian. Eli Vance returned to Indiana, not to his postmaster duties, but to his wife and his compass. The brass lockbox, now empty save for the latest unsolvable cipher sheet, sat hidden in his attic, a permanent reminder of the ideological war he waged. He never received another promotion or a public reward. His work was classified, his victories were invisible. He understood that the Hydra was a shape-shifting entity, adapting its key to whatever resource defined the nation's power. First land, then commerce, and perhaps one day something even less tangible. Eli lived out his days scanning maps, drawing lines that were supposed to bring order to the chaos of the frontier. But every time the numbers failed to line up, every time a financial report was slightly late, Eli felt a cold awareness. The clock was running, and somewhere in the shadows of the Republic, a master cryptographer was already building the next equation, waiting for the speed of information to betray the Union. Eli Vance remained the ghost in the machine, the perpetual guardian of the grid, waiting for the day he would have to ride again.